So first of all, we've got reflection. That is what we learned about yesterday. So a reflection is a transformation across a line that produces a mirror image. So when I am doing a reflection, I am taking every point in my pre-image and I am reflecting it across a line. So that's what we learned about on Tuesday, was reflections. All of these are transformations. A transformation is just anything that takes one shape and pulls it over to another one. So the next thing that we looked at today was a rotation, or another way to think of that is kind of a spin, like you're spinning your pre-image to get to your image. So a rotation is a transformation that turns an image around a point. When we're doing a rotation, you will have the point that you're rotating around, and it will tell you how many degrees you're going to rotate. And we're going to do more of those tomorrow. So rotation is when you kind of spin your pre-image. The next one is translation. A translation is another transformation that slides an image a certain distance. So when you have a translation, you will also be given how many units you're sliding it up and down, or right and left, or both perhaps. So a translation, a lot of times my students will call it a slide. Reflection, rotation, and translation are all examples of transformations. So transformations is kind of like the big word that all of those fall under. Kind of like how lions and tigers and house cats are all feline. So feline is the big word. Lions, tigers, and house cats are the more specific word that falls under feline. And all three of these transformations are examples of what we call rigid transformations. A rigid transformation is a transformation that keeps the same shape and the same size. So it does not change the shape of the image, and it does not change the size of the image. So reflections, rotations, and translations are all rigid. Let's talk about prime notation. So prime notation is something that we use to help us understand that an image or a pre-image has undergone a transformation. So notice that the figure labels can help you recognize what transformations are involved. So when we are doing prime notation, I'm going to go back to this slide. When we are doing prime notation, it is basically the way that we label a shape after it has been reflected, rotated, or translated. So prime notation is the way that we label a shape after it's been reflected, rotated, or translated. For example, if we look at this right here is what I would call my pre-image. This is what I start with, and it undergoes some sort of a transformation and ends up here. This is my image. We label the corresponding points with the same letter, but then use this prime notation. So here's what I mean by that. For instance, this is vertex A. And when I did my transformation, in this case, it was translated. So I slid it. It was a slide. When I translated it over, it ends up at this point. So to let anyone who's looking at my work know that this this point here came from point A. I would also label it A, but then I use this little apostrophe here, that's what we call prime notation, to show that a transformation has occurred. So A goes to A prime. That's how I would read that. I don't say A apostrophe, I say A prime. B then is translated and it ends up at B prime. C gets translated and ends up at C prime, and D gets translated and ends up at D prime. So the way I would read this is I would say A, B, C, D is translated to create A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. And that prime notation, those apostrophes, tell us that we took a pre-image and we performed a transformation on it. In this case, we translated it. We did a slide, and it ended up at A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. Now, if we don't know what transformation occurred, we can use that prime notation to help us figure it out. Sometimes it's really obvious depending on what the shape is, but like for this one, our shape is a square. So just without having any sort of points labeled, I wouldn't know whether I reflected it or rotated it or translated it. So having those points labeled helps me decide which transformation occurred. So if you take a look at this is what we had here. It was a translation. And I can see that I'm going from A to B, and then B to C, and then C to D, and then D to A. And it's in the exact same order in the image, A prime to B prime to C prime, and so on. So I can see it's not a mirror image. It wasn't spun around at all. It was just slid over. So it can help you understand which vertices match and also help you understand which transformation occurred.